the Torah will describe for us in next week's parsha. We'll read it. Bnei Yisrael yotzim biyad ramah. The Jewish people went out of Egypt. Biyad ramah means triumphantly. It's a change not only in the status of being a slave, but it's a change in the mentality. Because, for instance, in the history of the American South, where slavery existed until the Civil War, and Lincoln and the Union freed the slaves, most of the slaves stayed slaves afterwards also. They stayed with their master. They didn't leave. Because the mentality of the slave was that one is completely dependent. There's no room for personal initiative. And therefore, to say that you're free, it doesn't do anything for you. Because now what are you going to do? Who's going to support you, etc.? So when the Torah says the Jewish people went out, so that explains to us, they went out with biyad ramah in an arrogant, high-handed way. That explains to us a little of the fact of how many Jews went out and what kind of Jews went out and what happened to the rest of the Jews. And the Torah makes a cheshbon of reckoning that it was 600,000 men between the age of 20 and 60. So that allows at least for 2 million people to be involved, because you have the wives, the women, and then you have the children that are under 20, and you have the elderly that are beyond 60. So when you put it all together, it's a lot of people. Yet the Torah also tells us that a majority of the Jewish people did not leave Egypt. Many of them died in the Makas Choshech. Rashi points that out, that the Jewish people had, unfortunately, many funerals then. And it seems that there were Jews that stayed in Egypt and assimilated into Egypt and disappeared, which would be a natural progression of events. So, Meforshim discussed the fact that these Jews were not willing to be free. They weren't willing to be independent on their own. We couldn't deal with it. It was too much of a problem for them. And the acceptance of the Torah and the entire history of the 40 years in the desert, and then going to Eretz Yisrael and having to fight for Eretz Yisrael, and for 400 years before they establish a stable government, that requires a great deal of independence, personal independence and national independence. You have to see yourself in a certain light to be able to do this. And if you see yourself as a slave, and that was the entire danger that Moshe pointed out, that every time they had trouble, it said, Nitna Rosh V'Noshuva Mitzrayim. Or better, right, Zacharnu Sadoga. You remember in Egypt we had good food to eat. And here we're on our own. And Moshe attempted to instill within them the faith that they were not on their own. That, so to speak, they were guided by a heavenly hand that would preserve them and bring them and make them victorious, that somehow this spirit had to be within them. And it's very hard to do. It's very hard to change the attitude of people, to make people see themselves differently. I mean, we see that in our time too, that there is an exile mentality that exists, and that it's very hard to break it, even though the exile is not here anymore in many respects. But people are what they experienced, and people are what they were, and you can't just flip a switch. So the Torah therefore made mention of this, that when the Jewish people went out, they would go out beyond Ramah, they would have to have a new idea, a new way to look at the world. They couldn't retain what was before. And that was a difficult process. And that really explains why they didn't want to go to Eretz Yisrael. What did the Meraglim say? Meraglim said the truth. They said, that it's going to be a hard time, Eretz Yisrael. Right? Eretz Ocheles Yoshveh, and the Nephilim are there. There are all sorts of problems there. So the challenge was seemingly too great for them. They didn't want. Because they were, as the Meforshim say, they were the Dor Yotzei Mitzrayim. They were the Dor HaMidbar. And the Ibn Ezra says it openly, that they couldn't go, only their children could go because their children didn't remember Egypt. Their children, so to speak, didn't have a choice. They weren't raised that way. They weren't raised on the dependency that a slave has to a master. Whereas the majority of the Jewish people in the Dor HaMidbar, they were raised that way. And therefore, whenever problems presented themselves, and they didn't know what to do. And that's a challenge, for instance, that all parents face. The Torah says, Al Kein Yazov, Ish Esovi Vezimo. How do you let go? When do you let go? How much do you let go? That's a constant problem. And there are, unfortunately, many times that parents hang on too long. Children hang on too long. And therefore you just foster another generation of dependency, of difficulties, of dysfunction. Because that spirit of independence is not there. And that's why Chazal said, by the Aseres Adibros, it says chorus ala luchos. So the word chorus means engraved, cut on the luchos, and valtikre chorus ala cherus. And the whole yontif of Pesach is to give us this feeling of cherus, of independence, of self-sufficiency, of the fact that we can do great things, and that the person is independent. In our time, a great deal of dependency because government has interfered in personal lives to an extent that it never had before. So on one hand, it's good because otherwise there'd be so many people that wouldn't have anything. But on the other hand, it creates a state that most people are dependent. And in being dependent, then it restricts creativity, knowledge, all sorts of things that could be. So this idea, the crucible of the Jewish people, and what it meant to go out from Egypt, that's the great test. And therefore, whenever we do a mitzvah, the Torah says, "Zecher li'yitzias Mitzrayim." Remember that you went out from Egypt. Because going out from Egypt doesn't only mean that you are no longer a slave. It means that you have a state of mind. And the state of mind is that you went out of Egypt. And Chazal put that into the Haggadah. We say, "Behold over door chayav odom liros es atzmo kilu hu yotzo miMitzrayim." Meaning, in every generation, you have to see yourself to be an independent person. You have to be that you went out from Egypt. Now you have to do something. And the whole thrust of the Torah is that every person has a mission. Every person has value. Every person in his or her own way can do good things. So that's Gilu Hu Yotzo miMitzrayim. He went out of Egypt, right? He went out of Egypt, so now what does he do? How does he deal with it? That's the measure of the matter. Because an Eved, Avdo be'efkeira nechalei, the Gemara says. An Eved likes, he has barely enough food to eat, and he has a master, and he has no choices, and he doesn't care. So life is video games. It's whatever you want to play, whatever you want to do. There's no responsibility involved. And Yetzias Mitzrayim, it puts responsibility. That's why the Meforshim say that the Matan Torah had to be after Yetzias Mitzrayim. If you didn't get to Yetzias Mitzrayim, you would never have said Na'aseh v'nishma. You never would have accepted the Torah. You'd never be willing for that challenge. And because of the fact that you were dependent. You were stuck. But now that you're not dependent anymore, so then the choice is yours. So Nasa will do what we can. The Torah has value to us, speaks to us. There are challenges that force us in life. And that becomes the essence of what Yetzias Mitzrayim is. And that's why Pesach is Zman Cheruseinu, the time of our freedom. Freedom from, not only from bondage. So it was Zman Cheruseinu even when we were not free, so to speak. Even when we lived under the Tsar or under Stalin or in all sorts of problems. It was always Zman Cheruseinu. Because of the fact that we had to achieve it on our own, to become independent and be able to deal on our own. And that is the ultimate test of Klal Yisrael, of Yotzim Biyad Ramah. I just want to mention that there's a family that I'm putting together a few shekel for. If you want to help, you can give it to me. It's a big mitzvah. They are in a very serious problem, and I'm going to try and help them. At least they have food on the table. Rabbi Chananya ben Akash Yomer Rotza Kodesh Baruch Hu Lazakas Es Yisrael Lefichach Hirbel Lahem Torah Mitzvos Shenemar Adonai Chavei Tzman Tzidko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir. Kaddish? No. Okay.